Hello everybody, today I want to show you something really cool, and that is that you don't technically need to learn how to play an instrument in order to make use of it in your music. Because recently I decided to just buy some couple of cheap instruments so that I have some interesting stuff to play with. So I have also a harmonica here. That is the fourth one that I bought. Takes a little while for it to open up, but there it is. And the whole idea behind getting these instruments is that it's going to allow me to get some natural sounding sounds in there that you don't just get from, say, a pre-existing sample pack or some sample library inside a plugin like Contact or Falcon or Omnisphere. So today I want to show you how you can record samples out of these in order to use them in your own productions and actually use them effectively as well, making sure that they're tuned correctly, making sure that they're processed correctly. So that is what we're going to get into today. So this is the project that I have. I just have a sample kick and bass that we can lay some instruments on top of. It's nothing fancy, nothing to write home about. Of course, it isn't mixed or anything like that. So what I want to do is I want to start off by just recording a whole bunch of sounds that we can use. And I'm not going to care about the key or anything like that. What I'm going to care about is just that we have some sounds that we're getting. So I'm just going to arm for recording. You can probably tell by now that when I said that I don't know how these instruments work, that I was not kidding. I'm just kind of playing around with it and I don't really know how to play any of them. I've just gotten them a couple of days ago. So as I experiment, I'm probably going to find more interesting ways of playing them and also just get better at playing them. For now though, as I said, I just care about getting some interesting sounds out of this, and then through processing and manual tuning, we'll get them to actually fit within the context of our kick and bass. That should be enough of a recording to get at least a couple of interesting things out of that. So let's dive into the processing itself. What I prefer is to work on individual audio tracks for the individual sounds that I'm going to use. So for example, let's have a listen to a couple of these sounds over here. This is probably a cool one that we can do some cool stuff with. So I'm going to just cut it out over here and drag it on its own track here. And then we need to check the tuning. The way that I like to do that is through the EQ. We have a C, an E, and an F. Now I know that the kick and bass is in D sharp and its relative major should be F sharp, if I'm not mistaken. So what I'm gonna have to do is tune it to that, which is 6 semitones up. The reason why I say relative major is because we have a C, an E, and an F. And those are, I guess, part of the major scale, because the major scale starts at C. But let's see just what happens if we play it like this. And we can always change the tuning if we want to. honestly, depending on the context that we're obviously going to get on here with some of the other elements, it's gonna maybe work or maybe not. But for now, let's just keep it like this and move on to the next element, which is gonna be maybe something like this pan flute thing that we have here. Again, I believe this is playing essentially all the white notes on the keyboard, right? But we can check that. It seems to be doing exactly that. So what I'm going to do is turn it up, first of all. Make sure that it has a bit of a fade in and fade out. Just place this over here. Like that ending note to be this guy. I would like that to be in tune. So let's see where that hits. That seems to be a B. So I'm going to turn that up. C, C sharp to D sharp here. And then with a little bit of extra reverb, something like this, and then maybe a little bit of removal of those high frequencies, those harsh frequencies. We'll get something like this. Which is just a cool atmospheric sound. What I would also want to do is take some of these sounds that we have here and slice them. As you can see, we get 20 slices out of that, which is very, very cool, because that means that we should have enough to play around with all of the individual versions of the sound, right? There's a few in here that don't really do anything, so I'm going to delete those, that guy and that guy. Open up these guys. I'm going to use this to write in a cool idea here. We'll go with 4 bars here. I know this is currently in the one-shot group, but we can make a cool sequence out of this. Let's remove U. And now with this MIDI, we have the possibility to just randomize between the notes. So what we can do is set up an arpeggiator. Let's use a little bit of OTT to process this. Now this together with a little bit of echo could be cool. Another cool thing is to take this and group it. I'm grouping the arpeggiator with it so that we have a different arpeggiator for both channels. And what I'm going to do is have one for the left channel and one for the right channel so that we get the stereo effect. I'm doing this so that we get different notes, by the way, and therefore different slices triggered. Otherwise, it's going to trigger the same slice for the left and the right channel, and you don't really get the stereo effect from that. Now, when it comes to tuning, this may be all over the place, but there's quite an easy trick inside of Ableton to just take any sort of sample and just tune it to whatever note that you want. And that is going to be the spectral resonator. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make sure that it's tuned to D sharp, as you can see. I'm choosing D sharp 0 here because that is nice and low. Maybe have 2 voices of it. But now it's resonating at the key of the track that we want to, and therefore it's always going to work within the context of our track. Another cool trick that it has is that it has this shift parameter, which we can use to like slightly increase the range that it's pitching around, I guess. That is maybe a cool parameter to randomly modulate with something like an LFO. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set up another random modulation to randomly modulate the rate here. That's already cool, but let's take another sample so that we can play with some more stuff. Let's see what this is. This is of course that harmonica. You can use that as maybe a nice slide in. It is a little bit too long for what I want. I want it to be exactly 2 bars long. And I would like this to fade in over time. Of course, the main thing that we have to look at is the tuning. So let's see if we can find that. It does sound like it's doing octaves, but honestly, I don't know enough about the instrument at this point to tell. Seems to be a, is that a major chord? Yeah, that's a C major chord. So again, we'll have to tune this up 6 to get to the relative major of D sharp minor, which is I usually write in minor keys, so that is why I'm using a relative major here. Let's actually get this an octave lower instead. And now adding a delay as well as our reverb should get us a nice psychedelic sound. What's usually cool with these kind of samples is doing a little bit of EQ automation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this come in and become brighter. And then I'm also going to start fairly broad and narrow it as it becomes higher. You can hear that towards the end makes it so that it comes in a little bit later with the higher harmonics of it. And that just gives it more of a sliding in effect, which I like. Of course, there's different samples that we can use. We also have this kind of drum pattern that I made towards the end here. Let's see if there's something cool that we can do with this. The important thing with drums is that you make sure that it's at least somewhat warped and somewhat in time with Psytrance, because it's such a, I guess, rhythm-driven idea, right? Rhythm-driven genre. It's important that, well, as you can see, it is actually nicely in time if I warp it like this. But using this as your own custom drum loop and not relying on just sampled loops is a fairly interesting idea. Of course, this can be just a single layer of it or something like that. What I do want to do is make sure that it doesn't have too many low frequencies. But this as a percussion under your main drum loops could be interesting. So, for example, if I go in here and I take some of my top loops, or not my top loops, but the loops that I like to use. And then just some of the drum sounds that I tend to use. So we would need a snare, of course, on the 2 here, and then on the 4. And then I want a open hat. Just a standard 909 would do. That's already a lot more interesting than just your standard kind of sound. One thing that I do like to do is, because all of these recordings are done in mono, it shows a left and the right channel, but it's basically printing the exact same thing to the left and the right channel with the way that I have my audio routing set up. What I like to do is generate a little bit of stereo wave for most of my recordings. So something like M stereo spread is usually a good idea. And the same is going to be true on stuff like this harmonica thing that we made. Just having a bit of extra stereo wave coming from the dry sample and not just the echo and the reverb here would be nice. And I could do the same over here with this guy. And the same over here. And now this is going to be a massive improvement as well. So as you can see, we get a very cool workflow as well as endless possibilities out of them. Of course, there's infinitely different ways that you can play these instruments and then process them. And you just have to come up with a few creative ways of doing that. Overall, these instruments together, I believe, cost me less than 60 euros for 4 instruments. That is actually fairly nice. And when it comes to getting these kind of instruments, I don't really care about their build quality or anything like that. It's not something that I'm going to use in every production all the time. It's not the kind of instrument that I'm going to take with me everywhere. It's just one of those fun tools that you can use every once in a while and that you can pick up every once in a while and experiment with it. So I just go on Amazon, buy the cheapest possible stuff that I can find. And just with my existing microphone, routing that into the DAW is going to allow me to sample whatever I need. So hopefully this could inspire you to try something similar. If you do, make sure that you leave maybe a comment with a few different processing tips or stuff like that in the comments down below, because this is still something that I'm fairly new at. I just got these instruments 2 days ago. But that's going to be it for the video. I hope that you enjoyed it and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.